Well, hello there. I am Dr. Jamain Hatton, and it has been a long time coming. I know you're excited. This has been probably a year late, but it's finally here, and we are reviewing today George Orwell's Animal Farm. And I like this one. This is probably one of the best novels we have had in a very long time. Because if we really dive into it and we examine our own Caribbean society, within our own Caribbean countries, there are several elements of the animal farm. Our political leaders might not like that comparison, or this comparison is about to come, but if you are open minded, we can see that this book, written in England, is still relevant to our Caribbean society today, and is still relevant to many governments all across the world. But let me not give you too much just yet. Let's get ready to go into the animal farm. Maybe too, your house might be an animal farm. Let's go into it. George Orwell's Animal Farm. All right, so you know I like to give you some bit of information about the book before we get into the actual book. So the author is George Orwell. George Orwell is the pen name of Eric Blair. So the real author, the real name of the author is really Eric Blair, but he goes by the stage name George Orwell. The book was written in 1944 and published in 1945. He had some difficulty publishing the book. Much of his work was actually on democratic socialism, and he particularly spoke against leaders who changed laws and rules to benefit themselves. Sounds familiar? Sounds like what we have here in the Caribbean. I gotta put a disclaimer here. the views expressed here is just for teaching purposes, nothing directly hinting to anything in our society. Just throwing that in there, because nobody's gonna take me to jail. But freedom of speech. It's all freedom of speech. So a lot of what we are about to look at is present in every single one of our countries across the world. The political leaders oftentimes make the laws in such a way that they are the ones who benefit from the laws, while the poor, the underprivileged, are disenfranchised or affected by those laws that are supposed to govern. And as we look at Animal Farm, I want us to understand that we might very well be living in an animal farm. Let's go into it. Good. So let's get into some background information. So this book is presenting a situation of fascism. Fascism is an oppressive form of government, like somewhat of a dictatorship, where there's a dictator and the government or the ruler controls everything on the market, controls everything, the labor, work, and there's no opposition. Any opposition that is going to rival or rise up against the government will obviously be condemned or will be killed or will not be allowed. So as we can go into this, this is a book that is written to show fascism, to show how governments become dictatorship, and to show just how when people allow or give powers to political leaders, they become dictators, and when they become dictators, the people suffer. So it is written largely to make an allegory of what appears to be, or what is, the Russian Revolution. So in this book, we had a few name changes. First, the name of the farm was Manor Farm. Hope I pronounced that right. Manor Farm was then changed to Animal Farm. So it's pretty much similar to what happens in the Russian Revolution. So in Russia, the name of Russia was changed, and then the name was changed back. Pretty much what happened here on the farm. So the idea of the farm, the animal farm, is like Russia in the Russian Revolution, and the manor farm is like pretty much like Russia prior to the revolution, right? And in this book, there are some individuals that are very, very interesting. And the characters, if we pay careful attention, we can align one of these characters with some of our political leaders in our own Caribbean country. While I do not want you to understand and take the book from a personal country by country comparison, I want you to draw comparisons with what might be happening in this book with what might be happening in your Caribbean country. Because that is how the CXC exam will interpret it. They will not ask you specifically what is happening in Jamaica or what's happening in Guyana or what's happening in Trinidad, but it will ask you to draw comparisons with two incidents or two instances of what is happening in the Caribbean society and what is similar in this animal farm. Right? So that's how they're going to take it. Right? So while I want you to understand the stories behind Animal Farm, I want you to also be able to realize that the Animal Farm, though it's somewhat fictional, still lives on. So who are these characters, these main persona? So we have the old major, which is the old pig. And then there is the Snowball, the good guy, or what we think is the good guy in our books. And then Napoleon, who is much of the dictator, right? Those are the prominent characters here, right? In the quest for this revolution. The idea of Mr. Jones is a model of Tsar Nicholas II, and the idea of Old Major is modeled off of Lenin, who actually was the leader of this revolution that happened in 1917. So a little background for us to know exactly where this book is coming. The book is really an allegory of the Russian Revolution, and in this Russian Revolution there were some main characters there. Old Major, who was the leader of this revolution, or at least started up this revolution, and then Mr. Jones is the person who more or less was defeated to get this revolution on the road. Right? So good. So let's go into it with that background information. Let's go straight into the events of what happened in Animal Farm. Good. So background is always important. So Vladimir Lenin is one of the early political leaders of Russia. And Vladimir actually ascribes to the Karl Marx theory of communism. And in doing this, he basically is going to say that the workers of the world should unite and free themselves of anybody who come across as economic oppressors. So anybody that seems to want to stifle the layman, Vladimir Lenin says the workers of the world must free themselves of those persons who are oppressive, right? So it was monumental in the sense that Lenin was actually one of the persons who would have allowed for the change of the name from Russia to the Soviet Union. So, and if you can remember, if you can recall, as we will see later on here, Manor Farm was the first name of this farm, and it was changed to Animal Farm, and then it was changed back to Manor Farm. So similarly, the name Russia was changed to the Soviet Union, and then it was changed back to Russia. So what is happening in this book is pretty much an allegory of what is happening in the real life of that of Russia. Right? So George Orwell, or Eric Blair, is using characters that are animals on this British-like farm to expose the truths or the horrible realities of what governments are like. How governments usually abuse the people for their own good. Sounds familiar? Mind you, I didn't call the names of government, right? Anyway, so yeah, George Orwell is saying that, you know what? We're going to use animals because we don't want to offend anybody, but we're going to call some people pigs, and we're going to call some people horses, right? So we have this nice little storytelling, this fable being created here, where we're using animals and a farm-like setting to tell a story of the truths of what happened in governments. And just like our society, just like our country, there are many characters. And similarly, if we're going to use an animal on a farm, there are many animals on this farm as our society. So, like you can imagine, there are many characters, many characters. But we have some important ones and some not so important ones. So we're going to spend some time speaking about the important ones. So who do we have? We have one of the most important character is Old Major. Old Major represents Vladimir Lenin, like we spoke about earlier. He is this, literally in the book, he is this respected boor. When he called for a meeting, he was getting old and he realized that he was gonna die soon. He called for this big meeting, and every animal on this farm must have been there. But he didn't say that, but everybody knew if Old Major is calling for a meeting, everybody has to go. So everybody went to hear what this respected boor had to say. And he really was the founder of animalism, the person who said, you know what, we have lived too long where we benefit man or the leadership or the government, and we are doing very little for ourselves. So he birthed the idea of animalism, where the animals must unite to make sure their interest is always represented. So as a result, he gave some commandments. He said that these are seven, I think it's seven. Yeah, I think it's 7 commandments, and these 7 commandments are to be followed. And it's because of those commandments that he would have allowed for equality among all the animals of this farm, and for them to live in unity and to rid themselves of any sort of the human presence. And as we go on to look more into it, we will understand exactly why these 7 commandments were crafted by this Old Major, and we would see how much really he put some thought into the things that he put down as commandments. So that's one of the characters. Then we have Napoleon. No, let's not talk about Napoleon. Let's talk about Snowball first. We've got to talk about the important people first. So Snowball is my kind of leader. Snowball is the person who I envision myself to be. And Snowball is this individual who allegorically represents Leon Trotsky, which is a popular or very respected leader in Russia, or the early history of Russia, that is. And his main philosophy was really to promote the animalism as described by Old Major. So he wanted these 7 commandments to be known by everybody, and for the animals to all work together to make sure the ideas or the ideology of animalism is respected. So he made sure that all these commandments are written on this large screen for everybody, well, not screen, wall, for everybody, painted on this wall for every animal to be able to read once he or she can read. And his most important, and this is why I particularly like him, his most fundamental thing that he brought with his leadership was education. He realized that it was pivotal for any country that, or any farm, let's say that, who is about to rid itself of any sort of oppression, must have educated individuals. So imagine, in our society today, if we want to take away anything from Animal Farm, we will take away the importance of education. Because when we educate the people can realize what is nonsense from what is not nonsense, and speak up for their rights and speak up against what might appear to be the trampling of their rights. So Snowball actually showed us how education is pivotal in ensuring our rights are respected and for this ideology of animalism to be promoted. So he had one other brilliant idea, was to build this large windmill. So that's what most of the animals were doing on a daily basis. And the idea of the windmill was really to provide electricity for the comfort of the animals. Remember, everything about animalism is to improve the life of the animals, to improve the life of the normal people of this animal farm, right? And if you can imagine, when Snowball was pushed out of this farm, pushed out of this society, his plans that were supposed to be for the benefit of everybody were somewhat reshuffled and disguised, and we will see just what I mean by that. So the next individual is Napoleon. Napoleon, of course, is another Boer, and allegorically he represents the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. And in this character, we see that just how people can be manipulative. It is really Snowball at first called himself leader. So leader, let's back up a little bit. After Old Major died, just after Old Major had a big meeting with everybody, he died. And the two obvious leaders of the time were Napoleon and Snowball. Snowball assumed that front man, that leadership position. And everybody was really listening to him up until he was pushed out of this animal farm. And after which, Napoleon became leader because it was Napoleon who pushed Snowball out. And as a result, we will talk about exactly how that pushing out happened. But as a result of all of that, we had Napoleon assuming the position of leader and requests that everybody calls him leader. If you're a leader, you don't have to have everyone to call you leader. If you're a boss, people don't have to always call you boss. So by just the name change, we can already see that Napoleon was all for himself. Pretty much just like what the oppressive human that they were trying to get rid of, Mr. Jones, really just like what he did, is the same thing that Napoleon was doing. But of course, worse than Mr. Jones did. Right, so let's talk a little bit about Mr. Jones. So let's back up a little bit. So these animals are on a farm, and this farm that they're on is Manor Farm, and the farm is owned by Mr. Jones. So Mr. Jones appears to be the economic oppressor of this farm. He is the one that is oppressing the animals from realizing their true dreams and their true potential and to live their best life. So the first person that they have to get rid of if they are to realize animalism is the oppressor in the form of Mr. Jones. So who exactly is Mr. Jones? So Mr. Jones is the owner. He is the one who neglects to feed the animals. He's the one who abused them. He's a drunkard and all of that stuff there. Right, sorry about that. So Mr. Jones is the first form of an oppressive leader or a dictator that these animals on this farm were subjected to. And the main characters, the main leaders of the farm, Snowball and Napoleon, came together, fight their forces of Mr. Jones, rid the farm of Mr. Jones, and then they became leader of this farm. Really, it was Snowball that became leader, and when Napoleon pushed Snowball out, Napoleon became leader. Right, so that's a good gist of what is the story so far as we discuss the main characters. So let's talk about some other characters now. So Boxer. Let's talk about Squealer first. Squealer was the mouthpiece of Napoleon. So he was the one who was smooth with words. Now he would get the people, which would be the animals on this farm, to do whatever he so choose for them to do, right? And why would he get them to do these things? He does it with confidence. I tell you, confidence is the wealth of anyone. if you really want to get your way with people, or you want to get people to believe what you're saying, do it with confidence. You might be saying the most nonsensical thing, but when you do it with confidence, you make the person question what they know. Is what they know really the truth? Yeah, people question themselves. So Squealer did everything smoothly, and he made the animals question themselves. When he changed the law, the commandments that were written on the wall, and he made it sound so trivial, it made it seem as though the animals, their eyes were deceiving them. It never used to be that, it used to be this, and he does it so confidently that the animals blame their memory for deceiving them. So he was the mouthpiece of this leader, Napoleon. Right? So the one that was smooth with the words. So Boxer. I'll talk about Boxer and I'll talk about Benjamin together. Boxer and Benjamin were best of friends. They were thick as thieves. Boxer was the illiterate horse, the one that was... I get sad when I talk about Boxer. He was really abused for his physical strength. He was the strongest. He was so mighty strong, and he used to do everybody's work in one and does it fast than everyone else. So Boxer was just brilliant in terms of a hard worker. Anything that goes wrong, anything that happens, his motto was always, I will work harder. And Napoleon was always right. So that was his two ideologies. I will work harder, and Napoleon is always right. And that just goes to show. He was a dunce, by the way, if I didn't say that. He was retarded. He was dunce. He couldn't go past A, B, C, D. And when he did go past those, he already forgot A, B, C, D. Right? So while they were teaching him to read, he couldn't read far. So you can imagine that in a society where anyone cannot be able to think for themselves, they will be used, abused, mistreated. And that's exactly what happened with Boxer. He was abused, he was used, and he was discarded when he no longer served the purpose to which he had, which was for physical strength. So he was used for his physical strength and discarded or killed or taken to the slaughter when he had no longer hold the power that he used to hold. Donkey was the quiet one. Donkey knew how to read, but Donkey just think, we say that in Guyana, just think, Donkey just kept to himself, and Donkey just do the bare minimum and go about his business. Listen, that's not my pay grade. I ain't care. I ain't getting paid for that. You want me to help you move this thing? We will do that, and after that, nothing else. Donkey just inky. So that's there, our little talk about Boxer and Donkey. And Donkey is Benjamin, if you didn't know. So Boxer is the horse, Donkey is Benjamin. A little bit more about Boxer and Benjamin the donkey. So the Boxer represents the uneducated working class people. The people who will believe whatever they're told, easily believe propaganda. Because why? They lack the knowledge of basic reading skills to think for themselves and to form reasonably deduction. So he represents these uneducated middle class working people that oftentimes show that because they lack education, they are not able to reason, and they're often abused and easily believe in propaganda. While Benjamin is really the opposite. Benjamin is actually very wise. But Benjamin the donkey just don't care. He's going to do the bare minimum, like I said before, and he will laugh at everyone else for believing nonsense. Right? So let's look at it just in a little bit. It was really Donkey or Benjamin that really understood what was happening to Boxer when Boxer was going to be slaughtered. Everyone else believed that he was indeed sick and they were going to take him to the hospital. But it was Benjamin who read the words on the van and realized that, you know what, they're about to slaughter this guy. And then he broke all hell loose because Benjamin and Boxer were friends, and he was hysterical when his friend was going to be killed. And since then, I think Benjamin was never the same again when Boxer was basically killed. And that really signaled a turning point, that Benjamin knew that, you know what, we cannot trust these leaders, because these leaders are going to abuse us. And I think at that point Benjamin knew that, you know what, I have to get out of this dump. And probably if he only had listened or looked at Molly earlier, he would have been out of that place. So the next character is Molly. Molly is my spirit animal. So who is Molly? So Molly was this horse that realized nonsense when she saw it, and she was like, you know what? I am not going to do this. I'm going to pack up my traps and leave. So Molly is really like my spirit animal. We ain't taking nobody's stress. We making nobody stress we out. We do what we gotta do, and we beat out. Right? So Molly, well, she's a minor character. She's not really important. But we just looking at what Molly did. And it's very important for us to understand that if everybody was like Molly, they were a long time ago, and there would have been no oppression on this farm, and everybody would live good. So Molly liked ribbons, and she liked these ribbons in her hair, and so on. Right? So when this farm was now Animal Farm, they told Molly that she can no longer have ribbons. And Molly's a girl with your things, so Molly clearly was not having that. So they said she can't wear ribbons anymore, and they put a hold on that. And then they tell Molly too that she can't take sugar anymore. And Molly's a girl with a sweet tooth, so she likes sugar and she likes ribbons. So Molly was like, I can't wear ribbon. I can't eat sugar. Wait, man, they're controlling my life. And Molly was like, you know what? Nope, I'm not having it. I out. And Molly dip. Molly was like, yeah, just try with your stress. I gone. And the story had it that Molly was seen on the neighboring farm sometime after. Yeah, if people realize, like Molly, when nonsense is nonsense and beat out, we wouldn't have oppression, right? So that's Molly and a little bit there of the characters. So we have some other characters that were just mentioned. Moses is this raven that is touted to be how religion can be used to control people. We have some other characters in the form of sheep and dogs. So the sheep were just like blind people who couldn't, of course, read, and they were just bleating whatever nonsense they were told. And so they were blind and foolish, and they followed whatever the rules are or whatever they're told to do. So imagine those people in our society that just follow whatever they're told. And then the dogs, I think, are very important. Though they were not active, they're very important in the way Napoleon controlled the script. So the dogs were found by Napoleon earlier on in the story, and he hid them away and trained them. He grew them up, and they were like his army, his police, his soldiers, and they're obviously going to protect his interests. So whenever anybody oppresses, whenever anyone challenges or opposes the view of Napoleon, it is the army of dogs that Napoleon will use to get rid of those ideologies. So is that what he did to drive out Snowball? So was it the dogs that drive out Snowball? It was the same dogs that controlled the people whenever they attempted to even question any decision that Napoleon made. Right? So isn't that similar to what happens in our society? Yes. whenever there is some sort of revolution, whenever there is some sort of uprising where people are challenging the views of government and they're protesting and so on, what do governments do? They send the army, they send the soldiers to control the people, to quiet the people. So just like what happened in this animal farm is exactly what happens in our society today. So it's quite similar, the stories in this fable and the stories that happen in our country that we call whatever. Good. But really, on a realistic note, Molly represents the people that were a part of the population of this animal farm that did not believe in the revolution, did not believe the revolution was to happen, and as a result, Molly simply did not support it and would have relocated as a result. So, and that's quite true about our society. We're also going to have people who will not support a cause, whatever the cause is. It can be for the greatest good. Some people just will not support it, and some people will, as a result, move themselves out of the way, right? And they don't necessarily have to be seen as a bad individual or a bad character. It's just that some people are just like Molly. Some persons are just not going to support a particular fight, and that's perfectly okay, right? So that's a little bit about Molly. So if you're not following yet, I'll just give you a quick recap of what the story is in this book. So this novel, a novella rather, a shorter version of an actual novel, is telling us a story about this Russia and the era where Russia was going to get a revolution, right? And it talks about the leaders that play the important role of creating this revolution and allowing people to live their best life. And to do that, to talk about Russia, they're using an animal farm to do so. And the leaders of the animal farm is most likely a symbol or an allegory of the Russian Revolution and the leaders of that revolution. So in this book, the start of it starts with the animals on this farm being abused by their owner. This is Mr. Jones. And there was a wise pig among the animals, and he realized that, you know what, this abuse is going to continue, and we need to make sure all of the animals are protected from this. So he birthed what is called animalism, and he gave 7 commandments to all animals to follow, and how they can always remember and make sure animalism lives on. After he died, 2 pigs took over. Snowball was a visionary, the one that really wanted to see the best for animals and all animals being equal and all of that. But of course, Napoleon, which is another pig, thought that, you know what, Snowball is just not my guy, and we have to get rid of him. So he used his army of dogs to run off Snowball, stole Snowball's idea, and then convert it into his own, and worked and overworked and worked again the animals of the farm. And little did the animals realize they were at one point worse off than they were before. So it's a situation where we have abuse happening over and over again, but as it's put by the animals, at least the abuse is not coming from the hands of the humans. And it's a very important. We'll use snippets quite briefly. We'll show snippets from the book and we'll talk about them. But I'm going to tell you one of my personal favorite lines from this book. It was really where they said all humans are dead humans. The best humans are dead humans, or something of that nature. And it really paints a picture to us that the only good human in the eyes of the animal are humans that are dead. To give us the impression that no human is to be trusted. But what is created in the book is that the pigs became just like the persons that they were trying to get rid of. And that's exactly what happens in our Caribbean society or in our governments. Oftentimes, a government comes to people or leaders come to a people to get the people to get rid of a particular leader or a type of government, and they become just like the persons that they force out. It happens in all our societies. It's happening here in the Animal Farm, this book, and it's trying to show us that our society is no different from the other societies in the past, where we have leaders creating ideas of people and using people for their greater good, abusing those people, and when they can't use those people anymore, they get rid of them. And these leaders change the rules, change the laws, change the commandments by which people go by just for the benefit of themselves. And that's quite sad that something like that happens, but it's quite reality of what is happening in our Caribbean nations and what's happening in our society. Governments are corrupt, and instead of identifying acts of corruption, identifying where they may have erred, they simply cover up, change the laws so they don't appear as though they're biased or they don't appear as though they are lawless. So that is the story in a brief view of what is happening in Animal Farm. Now, there are quite a lot of things I can talk about in this book. There's so many things for us to teach and talk about and establish, but we will go on and on and on and on, and we will not end because there's so many things. So just a brief look at what is happening in Animal Farm. We will now look at some snaps, or some snippets of different parts of the book that I thought was important and talk about those different parts, after which we will go into looking at our themes and then talk quite briefly. I'll do a follow-up video on this, an addendum on this, where we'll talk about our devices, because we cannot finish off a series on this novel if we don't talk about our narrative techniques. So this is the end of the first of the episodes looking at the Animal Farm. Our next episode will examine the themes of Animal Farm, and the other episode will discuss our devices or the literary techniques used by Eric Blair.